Opinion. Power without scrutiny is a threat to democracy. Labour must be held to account. What if the government no longer asks for your permission to peer into your bank account? What if unelected officials nodded behind closed doors and suddenly your private financial life was no longer yours? This isn't the plot of a dystopian novel. It's not fiction. It's not future speculation. It's the reality Britain is now forced to confront, and the silence from those who should be defending our liberties is deafening. The events of the past week lay bare a truth many suspected but few dared say aloud. Labour's leadership, drunk on rising power and desperate to cement control, is now willing to compromise the very foundations of democracy. The proposed policy, full government access to the personal bank accounts of welfare recipients, without consent, oversight, or limits, is not just a misstep. It is an assault, one that should send chills down the spine of every citizen, regardless of party affiliation. Let's be clear, fraud prevention is a noble goal. Nobody disputes that public funds should be protected. But to invoke fraud as a justification for mass surveillance of the financially vulnerable is not just cynical, it's cowardly. It's a textbook authoritarian move. Create a monster, then declare yourself the only one brave enough to slay it, even if it means tearing up the rulebook in the process. Rachel Reeves, who presents herself as a steady hand of economic prudence, now stands accused of using doctored figures, projections riddled with glaring inconsistencies, to justify the surveillance regime. That alone should spark outrage. But the real scandal lies in the method, an unannounced, off-camera meeting with the governor of the Bank of England, absent of press, transparency, or accountability. What were they so desperate to hide? The governor's refusal to endorse the plan, and his reported fury behind closed doors, is a rare and damning indictment. This is not a partisan voice. This is not political theater. It is the clearest signal yet that Starmer and Reeves overreached, miscalculated, and underestimated the intelligence of the institutions and the public they hope to control. And when the highest financial authority in the land publicly questions the credibility of the government's numbers and the morality of their policy, it is not just a rebuke. It is a red flag flapping violently in the storm. Labour's top brass seems to believe they can bulldoze opposition with spreadsheets and slogans. But governance is not performance art. It is accountability, consistency, and the unwavering protection of civil liberties. The notion that the Department for Work and Pensions should be handed the keys to the private financial data of millions, without judicial review, without parliamentary scrutiny, is not reform. It's regression. And let us not forget the arrogance on display, not just in the plan itself, but in the reaction to its exposure. No apology, no clarification, no public justification worthy of its consequences. Just stone-faced silence and spin. Do they think we won't notice? That we're too weary, too distracted, too poor to fight back? If that is a calculation, then Labour has revealed something even darker than authoritarian ambition. They reveal contempt for the very people they claim to save. This isn't a one-off misstep. It's a window into Labour's governing philosophy. Control first, transparency last. From manipulating growth figures to mass authoritarian policy, to attempting to bypass democratic process entirely, Reeves and Starmer have shown a willingness to play with fire for the sake of political dominance. And if the institutions meant to check that power, the Bank of England, independent media, civil society, hadn't pushed back, the public would still be in the dark. It is not enough to call this a scandal. It is a warning. Because if a government can target the poorest among us with policies that erase privacy and due process, who do you think is next? When governments grow comfortable with secrecy and surveillance, the slide toward broader overreach becomes inevitable. Now is a time for resistance, not partisan bickering, but principled democratic resistance. The opposition must demand full transparency. Every document, every data set, every meeting transcript related to this policy must be released. Reeves must answer to Parliament, not in sound bites, but under oath. Starmer must acknowledge that leadership is not about secrecy and spin, but responsibility and restraint. The British public cannot afford to be lulled into apathy. This isn't about left versus right. This is about liberty versus intrusion. About a party that claims to fight for the people, but seems all too eager to turn them into suspects. About a political class that believes progress means power unchecked. And about a public that must now decide whether to let this pass as politics as usual, or to stand up and say, enough If this is what the future of governance looks like under Labour, then Britain is staring into a very dark mirror. It's time to shatter the illusion before the reflection becomes reality.